Hello everyone. Today we are going to talk about buyback of shares. It's a very interesting topic for the investors to know that whenever a company comes for buyback, so whether buyback should be accepted or not. So before we start, let us understand very carefully what does buyback mean. So whenever company says I'm going to buy back the share, what exactly it means, whether whether it is in the favor of the stakeholder or not, whether it is beneficial for the company or not, what is the reason why company is planning for the buyback. So buyback, as the name indicates, buyback by the company, which means where company is going to buy the shares back from its stakeholder. Like whenever you deal with the shares, like you have invested money in a company which is a listed company, big company. So whenever you want to buy the shares and whenever you want to sell the shares, so we generally as investor we do on a stock exchange. Like we know we have our demat account and we have our trading account with various depository participants. So what do? We just buy and sell the shares in the open market, so that we can easily control our holdings. But when it comes buyback from the company, which means where company is giving an offer to its shareholders, ki company is going to buy back shares from you. So instead of selling your shares in the open market, so you have the offer, you can sell it to the company. So as the name indicates, it's a buyback. That means company is going to buy back its share from its stakeholders. But why buyback? What is the reason for buyback? Why you want, if you want to go for the buyback, why you want to sell the shares to the company? Can't we sell our shares in the open market? Can't we do it in the through stock exchange? Why should we go to the company, or why the company should come to us? Why the company should offer us, and what at what price the company should come to us? Like if I am holding shares of, let's say, X Limited in a company, X Limited, let's say I'm holding 1,000 shares, and which has a market value of, as of now, as per the stock exchange, which has a market value of 1,000 per share. So now I need to calculate that if I want to sell my equity, if I want to sell my shares in the open market, so I will get 1,000 per share. In the meantime, the company comes up with an offer with every shareholders. If you want to sell your shares, the better option, company is coming up with a buyback. Better company, whether if you want to sell your shares, it's better sell it to the company. So now as investor, what I need to calculate is whether I should sell it in the open market at the rate of 1,000 per share, or whether I sell my shares to the company. At that time, as an investor, what should I do? Whether I should sell my shares to the company, whether I should sell my shares in the open market. I need to calculate my benefit. I need to check what is the benefit of the company, why company is offering me buyback, what is the hidden agenda, what is the purpose, the why company is going for buyback, what will I get out of it, and whether I can sell my whole shares. Let's say, as I said, I'm holding 1,000 shares in a company. So should I sell my 1,000 shares to the company, or should I sell my 1,000 shares through the in the open market, or is there any limit, or is there any restriction by which I can sell my shares? Like I can sell my 1,000 shares, I can sell my 50% shares, or I can sell my 25% shares. So is there any limit for the for selling the shares to the company? Because I'm sure everyone we know it very well. If I'm selling it in the open market, so better is if I'm having 1,000 shares, I can sell my 1,000 shares within a second. If I want to buy shares, I can do it within a second. But when it comes to the buyback, can I do so as an investor? Can I do so or not? If what's the difference if I'll be selling it through the stock exchange in the open market, and if it's selling my shares to the company under the buyback route, what is the difference in that? So that everything as an investor, whenever you have to take a decision, whenever you have to choose how to dilute your shares, how to sell your shares. So as an investor, it is very important for us to know whether to go for the for selling the shares in the market, or to go for the buyback if company comes up with an offer. But the main difference is this: buyback is not an option which you will have to give it to the company. Buyback will only come to you whenever the company will come up with a buyback option. Otherwise, no. It's not that I want to sell my shares. As I said, let's say I'm having 1,000 shares of X Limited. I want to sell my equity, right? So it's not possible that I will go to the company and I will request the company to come with a buyback offer or issue me the offer letter and come with a buyback proposal to me so that I can sell my shares to you. That is not allowed. That is not possible. Buyback will come only at the time when company will that will come to you on its own. When company will come with a proper plan, company will come with a proper offer, with the proper provisions, the company will come to you, will approach all the shareholders ki yes, company is coming for the buyback. Any shareholder any shareholder who wants to sell its shares, right, can sell it to the company rather than in the open market. But undoubtedly, without saying, I should say, definitely you will sell it to the company only if there is a good price and there is a price which is more than the market price. As I said, the listed price of my share is, let's say, 1,000 rupees. So that comes to, if I'm saying I want to sell my whole equity shares, that I am having 1,000 shares of market value of 1,000 rupees, that comes to rupees 10 lakhs. And let's say if company is coming with a buyback offer and saying, okay, we are going to buy back your shares, which will be at the price of 800. So definitely anyone can calculate easily that I will not go for the buyback, because better I would sell my shares. I would love to sell my shares in the open market rather than to sell it to the company, because company is coming with a lower price than the market price. So these are the certain few calculations, few points that has to be taken care by the investor before you choose for the buyback. Whether buyback or better to go for the open market if I want to dilute my equity, if I want to sell my shares. Buyback. So as I said, buyback means what? It's an act of buying something from the same person. Now, why we call it the same person? Same person, that means what? The company has issued shares to the investor, and the company is going to buy from the investor only. Right? So when company has issued shares to the investor, and company is going to buy from the same investor. Same investor does not mean like to whom the company issued share only, the company will go for the buyback from that shareholder only. No, it does not mean. That means investor. So investor is a term, that person who has directly invested money in a company under the route of various, like maybe in the public issue or right issue, or that's an investor who has directly invested in a company. The person who has purchased share from the stock market in a secondary market from the other shareholders, he's also an investor, right? So the company has issued share to the investor. Now company is going to buy back from the same person, matlab from the investor. So this is what we call buyback. So buyback, that means something from the same person you sold it to. It's a general definition, because we never say the company has sold shares, right? As an investor, you should also know one thing: company never sells its shares. Company always issues its shares. But just to make you understand the definition of buyback, so we are going to buy something which we sold it to you. So it's in layman's language, the general meaning of buyback is to buy something which already sold to you. In the similar way, buyback means where you are going to buy back the shares which company issued earlier to the investor, especially an offer by the company to buy shares from its own shareholders or investor. So this is the meaning of buyback, which I explained earlier. So company may. So now may. First of all, it is not mandatory for a company to go for buyback. Not at all. That's why I said you can't ask the company, you can't go to the company and say, Ki, I want my shares to be bought back by you, so you please come up with an offer for buyback. Not possible. It is up to the company. If company wants to come for buyback, company will come up with the buyback offer. If company does not want, company will not come up for the buyback offer. There may be a possibility, my company, let's say, if I was given an example, there is an X Limited, and let's say X Limited is a company which is, let's say, 20 years old company, right? 20 years old company, and that company has not come up with a buyback offer till date. So there may be a possibility. So first of all, as an investor, you should also know that buyback is an option which company will give it to the shareholders, number one. Number two, buyback is not at all mandatory for the company to come up. Buyback is not mandatory. That's why we have mentioned here the company may opt for buyback. The company may opt for buyback if the company has extra money, extra liquidity, extra cash, and company has no future plan for investment. That's why the company may come up for the buyback. So may means it's not optional, it's not mandatory, it is absolutely optional. It can be looked as a means, giving reward to the shareholders. Giving reward other than offering timely dividends. So now see what happens is, let's say my company came up with a public issue 1 or 2 years back, and all of you are my investors, all of you are the investors, shareholders of my company, who have invested crores of rupees in my company on the face value of the promoters, on the face value of the company, on the future growth of the company. So whatever the plans you had in your mind, you invested in my company. Now it's going to be 2 years. So my company has not declared dividend. My company has not come up with any other offer to the shareholders, because company is not doing well as of now. So now slowly what happens is the morale or the confidence of the investor that goes down. Obviously, let's say if you have invested money in a company and it's 2 years, it's been 2 years, you are not getting anything from the company, no dividend, no reward, nothing is there. So what happens is your morale will definitely go down. Your confidence will definitely go down, and it will have a great impact on you if the market value is also going down. Let's say you invested shares in a company. At that time, the price of the company, when the company issued shares to you, the price was, let's say, 90 rupees per share. After 2 years, it is 60 rupees per share, or let's say it's 50 rupees per share. Depending upon the certain parameters, the market value is going down. So as an investor, just think about yourself, just think about me. Like if I'm an investor, definitely I will not be happy to see that my investment is going down. At that time, I will never invest in the company again. I will rather prefer maybe to sell my shares of that company at a lower price, having a losses, than try and invest in some other company, so that I can have profit in that company as well, so that I can recover my losses from that company. So I have a lot of, I can plan a lot of things. But in the meantime, what company plans, we know the morale of the confidence of the investor is going down, market value is going down, confidence is very low. So if in future the company would be needing more money for its business, so no investor will invest in the company, because they are already unhappy, they are not happy with their existing investment in the company. So what company can plan at that time, just to boost up their confidence, just to show them directly or indirectly, we are with you at this stage, we are still with you at this stage. So company may come up with a buyback offer. We will say, okay, don't worry, my dear shareholders, if market value is going down, if you invested at a certain price, now today market value is low, so I'm coming up with a buyback offer, where if you wish, you can sell your shares to me. To me, that means to the company. So where company will come up with a buyback offer, at that time, maybe possibility company will offer you the price which is more than the current market price. But obviously, only then you will accept the offer of the company. If market price is at 40 rupees as of now, or 50, and company saying I'm coming with a buyback of 30 rupees or maybe the same price, so obviously that may not be acceptable to you as an investor, even not to me. So at that time, company will say, okay, don't worry, I'm with you, I'm coming up with an offer, I'm coming with an offer of buying back your shares, let's say at 60 rupees or 70 rupees. That may give certain relaxation to the investor. So the confidence will be high. So they will have trust. They will build the trust on the company. Yes, at this situation where we are facing a lot of challenges in the market, where the market value has gone down, the company has supported us. So we can say it's just giving a reward to the shareholders, where company is not declaring dividend, or there is no other mean the company is giving benefits to the shareholder. So this is one, it can be looked up in that way, where company is giving an offer for buyback, so where you can sell your shares. But again, make sure it is an offer. Buyback is not mandatory from company's point of view, even from shareholders' point of view. if company is coming with a buyback offer, if as an investor, if you still love the company, if you still feel that share, the market price will go up, I don't want to dilute my equity, I don't want to sell my shares. So it is absolutely up to you. There is no restriction. There is no, that does not mean the company has come up with a buyback offer and you will have to accept it. No, there is no provision, right? Buyback, also known as share repurchase, which that means where company buy its own outstanding shares to reduce the number of shares available in the open market. Company buyback shares for number of reasons. Number of reasons. I was saying like, what can be the reasons? So the one reason I told you, maybe to reward the shareholders. There can be a number of reasons where company may opt for the buyback. There can be number of reasons. Number one, to increase the value of remaining shares available. Like for example, generally we say to increase the EPS in the hands of the shareholders, like what we call it's earning per share. Like for a simple example, let's say my total earning of the company, let's say 10 lakhs. I'll just give you a very simple example to make you understand. Today, company's total earning is, which is calculated obviously as per the law, let's say it's 10 lakhs, right? And total number of shares the company has, it's, let's say, maybe we would say 1 lakh. So now I'm saying that the total capital of the total earning of the company is 10 lakhs and the number of shares the company has, which is 1 lakh. So easily how we can calculate the EPS is that EPS, the earning divided by the number of shares, that is your EPS, earning per share in the hands of the shareholders. Now, whenever company will buy back, company comes for the buyback, obviously buyback means when company is going to buy back its share from the shareholders, the number of shares will come down. Let's say if out of 1 lakh shares, if company has bought back its shares, let's say for maybe 20,000. Let's say 1 lakh shares are there. Now remaining shares would be 80,000. So accordingly, when you will calculate the EPS, now earlier we were doing the 10 lakhs is total earning of the company divided by the number of shares which company has 1 lakh, which is 10 rupees. Now what company is doing, 10 lakhs earning and divided by the number of shares, which is 80,000. So that comes to 12 rupees or something like that. So you can calculate. So it will increase the earning per share, or what we say it's an EPS. It will increase the earning per share in the hands of shareholder. So this is one of the reason why company goes for buyback, just to keep the morale high, just to keep the confidence high in the investor. Can now see the EPS has been increased in my hands. Earlier the EPS was 10 rupees, now EPS is 12 or 13 rupees. So whatever the case may be. So now that's a psychological impact on the investor. So look at from investor point of view. Now investor is looking at this earning per share that has been increased. The earning per share that has been increased. Second, why company goes for buyback? Again, generally there may be a possibility. Few companies they may do or they may not. Buyback, though, in any case, I've said that buyback is not at all mandatory. It's an optional for the company. Now, let's say in the open market, let's say someone who is a big investor who is buying shares in the open market on regular basis. Let's say there's an investor who is daily buying maybe crores of value of shares, maybe lakhs of value of shares in the market. So he's increasing his holding. So there may be a possibility after a certain period of time, let's say after 6 months, after 1 year, there may be a possibility that investor who is buying shares from the open market for the last 1 year, there may be a possibility he will have the major number of shares in a company. That means he will have the good percentage in a company. So there may be there are chances that at one particular of time he will take over the company. What we call it's a hostile takeover. So there may be a possibility where promoters' shareholdings are low and the person will try to increase his shareholding by buying shares from the open market so that his holding will be increased. So there may be a possibility he will take over the company. What we call it's a hostile takeover. So basically when you talk about the takeovers, so whenever one person takes over the another company, or when a company takes over the another company, we call it, say, like there are two categories of takeover. In just brief, I'm just talking about one is a hostile takeover. That means without the wish of the company, someone is going to take over the company. Other, we say it's a friendly takeover, when with the mutual consent, when you're going to take over the company. So I'm going to take over your company with a mutual agreement, with the certain terms and condition. That is friendly takeover. But whenever going to take over a company by buying shares through the open market, so that I will have more shares in the company, so that I will have more percentage of capital in your company, so by which I am going to take over your company, that is hostile takeover. If promoters of the company, if they get any idea about it, if they feel that someone is doing that, someone is going to do that, or someone is planning to do that, what do? They come up with a buyback offer, where they offer the shareholders to sell their shares to the company, right? To sell their shares to the company, so that their holding, public holding, will decrease, and the promoters' shareholding will increase, so that they can save their company, so that they can increase their holding, so that no one would be able to take over the company. So they may be one of the reason as well. As I said, maybe to increase the earning per share in the hands of the investor. There may be a possibility that company may plan. There may be a possibility company just want to reward the existing shareholders, because company is not declaring dividend and market value is going down. If you will see in the past, number of companies, lot of companies, they have done so, where market value is going down, just to keep the morale high. A lot of companies, they have done the buyback just to keep the confidence alive in the investor. Or maybe if company wants to avoid a takeover, which is a hostile takeover sort of thing, if company wants to avoid that, in that case the company may plan for buyback. Or maybe if company has surplus money, if company has no other way to invest money, if company has surplus money, then company can always go for the buyback. Buyback reduces the number of shares outstanding, thereby increasing the earning per share, and sometimes the value of shares. Right? As I gave an example, that's the total shares of the company we have. It's a 1 lakh shares, and out of 1 lakh, the company is company is going to buy back 20,000 shares. Obviously, the number of shares will come down to 80,000, and accordingly, your earning per share, EPS, will increase. If a company feels its shares are undervalued, the same thing which I was talking about. If company feels, obviously, why would company feel that my shares are undervalued? Obviously, when company will also feel that investors are not happy with the company, they are not happy with the investment they have made in a company. So whenever company feels its shares are undervalued, then it can go for buyback to provide investors with a good return, because the company is bullish on its current operations, and buyback also boost up the proportion earning that a share is allocated. Again, just because of the reason, just to increase the EPS, operations are not in control, they are not in a good condition, then company plans for buyback. Buyback can also be done because the reason for the compensation to the employees and the management with the stock option. So one part we discuss where company buys or company plans for buyback its share from the investors through stock exchange from the open market. So there may be a possibility when company plans for buyback to buy its shares from the employees, where company has issued shares to its employees under sweat equity share option, where company has issued share to its employees under sweat equity shares, or maybe under the ESOP schemes, what we call it, say, employee stock option plan. So where the company has issued ESOP to the employees, where company has issued under sweat equity shares to the employees to boost up the confidence of the employee, company can go for the buyback from them only. So now, two things that which we have discussed. Number one is the company can go for the buyback from the existing investors, shareholders, that is where shares are listed on a stock exchange from the open market. Second, if company is planning for the buyback, company can also opt for a buyback to buy shares from the employees of the company to whom shares were issued by the company under stock option, employee stock option, what we call say ESOP, or maybe issued under sweat equity shares plan. So accordingly, the company can go for buyback from the employees as well. A company may resort for the buyback for a variety of reasons that we discuss: excess floating stock in the market, poor performance of share, utilization of excess cash with the company. So there are still, we have good companies which opt the third route, where company feels ki yes, we have excess money, we have excess liquidity, we don't need funds as of now, or maybe we have no investment plan in the near future. So let's do one thing: shareholders who have invested money in a company on the trust, on the faith of the promoters of the company, so let us reward them now. So let us pay back them. So there may be a possibility that still there are good companies which the good companies which feel like we should reward our, they do have respect for the shareholders, like we should also reward the shareholders since they have extra or maybe surplus cash. Many times company has excess cash in its balance sheet, which company wants to distribute to the shareholders. So two ways: either you can go for the dividend, or maybe you can go for the buyback. A buyback is one of the mode by which company can achieve its objects. Now, coming to the point, advantages of the buyback. What are the advantages? If company is planning for the buyback, what are the advantages to the company? Helps the promoter to formulate an effective defensive strategy. Now see, defensive strategy against hostile takeover bids, so which I was talking about, just to avoid that hostile takeover. So promoters, they want to increase their holding, so better ways to go for buyback so that their holding will increase and the shareholding of the public will come down, so you can easily avoid the hostile takeover. Surplus cash maybe distributed. Buyback are taken to increase the stake of the promoters, so which enable the promoters holding to cross 90%. So there is another possibility. Let's say if my company is a listed company, big company, where shareholders have invested a lot of money, right? So now I want to go for delisting. I want to delist my shares. So now if I go for delisting in the same way, like in the similar way, like public is a shareholder of my company, so that would be difficult for me. There are a lot of compliances to be done. So better I will start preparing myself accordingly, like I will start buybacking shares. The company will start buyback of shares. Accordingly, the public shareholding will come down. Ultimately, the promoter shareholdings will be there, so you can easily approach the stock exchange for delisting. So if a company is planning for delisting, then another buyback is a good option, so that the investors holding will come down and the promoter shareholding will increase. When a company buyback its shares, the outstanding share capital comes down and improves the financial evaluation, like EPS, return on equity, which I already talked about. Like EPS will increase, and accordingly, because the number of shares will come down, your earning per share in the hands of the shareholder will increase. Now, how buyback can be done? Buyback are carried out in three ways. Number one, shareholders may get a tender offer, where they have an option to submit or tender all or portion. Now, understand the word all or portion of their shares within a given time frame at a premium to the current price. Again, at a premium to the current price. This is what I said. If company will go for the buyback at the same price, which is a market price, or company will go for the buyback maybe lower than the market price, everyone knows about it, so no one will accept it. If market value is 80 and company is coming up with the 70, and market value is 80 and company is coming with the, even if 80, even then shareholder will never accept the buyback offer. So it's like company may get a tender offer, so company will just fix a date. Within a given frame time, company will come up with a date, like let's say from this date to this date the offer will remain open in the stock market. Like we buy and sell shares in the open market, similarly the company will start buying shares from the open market. At that point of time, if any shareholder who wants to sell his shares, maybe the complete shareholding, the maybe all the shares whatever you have, or maybe portion of that, again there's no restriction, there's no limit, right? If companies coming with there's a limit on the company which we'll be talking about in the next slides. Like there's a restriction on the company how much company can go for buyback. There's a limit which I'll tell you. Like for example, for a company, as per the provisions of the Companies Act, company cannot go for buyback in a year for more than 25% of total equity shares. I'll just come up with an example of the same as well. If company is going for the buyback, make sure the company cannot go for buyback for more than 25% of total equity share in a financial year. Right? But as far as shareholders are concerned, as well as investors are concerned, if company is coming with a tender offer where the company will buy the share from the stock market openly, make sure there is no restriction on you. Like company will say, okay, I'm going to buy, let's say 10 lakh shares in the open market from this date to this date. In that given time frame, the company will say, I'm going to buy back my shares from the investor through stock exchange at the given frame time, right? That number of shares would be, let's say 1 lakh. So as an investor, I should see whether I want to sell my complete shares, all the shares, or whether I want to sell my portion of shares, my 10% or 20% or 30%, whatever, that I have to decide. But there's a restriction on the company कि company cannot go for buyback for more than 25% of shares, equity shares in a financial year. But as an investor, whatever the time frame would be given, it's your choice. The company will come with company will come up with a tender offer at a given price. Company will give an offer to the shareholders. Anyone who wants to sell, he can sell it. Right? Obviously, this is a benefit which company will get. And why? Because company knows it. The shares of the company are undervalued or prices are going down. So better come up with a buyback offer so that we still have that faith of that trust of that investor. Companies may buy back shares in the open market over an extended period of time, may have outlined share repurchase program that purchases shares at a certain time or a regular interval. In the same way, where company come up with a plan in the open market, where company says, okay, I'm going to buy share in maybe over an extended period of time. So if you want, or maybe regular interval, the company will come up with a buyback. If you want, you can sell it to the company. Or maybe on proportionate basis from existing shareholders of the company. Right? Like, as I said, the company can go for buyback of maximum 25%. And this is a limit as per the law. If company is coming with a buyback, company can come up with a buyback of only 25% of total shareholding of the company, right? Which I'll explain with the help of example as well. If companies planning to come up with a pro rata basis, so every shareholder will get a chance, will get an offer of 25% only. If I'm having 1,000 shares, company says, okay, so you can only opt for 250 shares. If you're having 1,000 shares, maybe 10 shares, company will say 2.5, but obviously 2.5 not possible. So that may be your 2 or 3. So company will offer you that amount of shares. If I'm having 5 lakh shares, then accordingly on pro rata basis, on proportionate basis. This is what unlisted companies, public unlisted companies or private companies, so they always come up with a proportionate basis, because unlisted company shares are not listed on a stock exchange. So you cannot come up with a tender offer where company will buy its own share from the open market, because you are an unlisted company. You are a public limited, closely held public limited company, or maybe a private limited company where shares are not listed. In that case, company always comes up with an offer of 25%. Company says I'm coming with a proportionate basis, so maximum I'm coming with a buyback of 25%. Company may come for the buyback for less than 25%. Law says maximum is 25% of equity share capital in a financial year, but company may come up with, let's say, 10%. Company may come up with a 15% offer. The company may come with 25% offer, right? So it's up to the company, but maximum limit is 25%. So if company is coming up with a, let's say, 15% offer, company is coming with a 20% offer, so then company can say ki I can go for buyback, I'm coming with a buyback offer of 20%. So every shareholder has a right to accept that offer given by the company up to 20% of shares he has, up to 20%. So that's what we call the company is going to buy back its shares on a proportionate basis, on a pro rata basis. So proportionately the company would be giving it to you. The law which governs the buyback is like section 68, 69 and 70 of the Companies Act 2013, read with rule number 17 of the Companies Share Capital and Debentures Rule 2014. And for the listed companies, if you are a company, if your entity is a listed company, listed on a stock exchange, then you have to go with the SEBI buyback regulations 2018 as well. So where company has to comply, if it's a listed company, then company has to comply both the things. So company has to comply with Companies Act as well, and company has to comply with the SEBI regulations as well if you are a listed company. Now, how company will buy back? The company may buy back its own shares out of, let's say, if company has a lot of free reserves. Company has a lot of free reserves. So from free reserves, company can buy back its shares. Reserves, free reserves, if we look at the definition of free reserves, those reserves which is basically part of the profits which has been kept by the company as a reserve for the future purposes. Like company can declare dividend out of it, company can use that reserves for the purpose of buyback. So ultimately, company, if company is coming up with a buyback, the company should have something from where company will go for the buyback. So one is out of free reserves. In this particular section 68, for the purpose of buyback, free reserve also includes securities premium account. So let me clarify here to the investors. Security premium account is not a free reserve, it's a kind of a capital reserve. As the name indicates, security premium accounts means, so whatever the premium company has calculated, whatever the amount of premium that company has received from the investor by issuing shares, debentures or any other security, so whatever the premium that company has received from the shareholders by issuing securities to them, that amount is kept in a separate account, that is securities premium account, as the name indicates. So that amount will be kept in a securities premium account, which is kind of a capital reserve, not exactly, which is a capital reserve, and there is a usage of that from how company can use that reserve, where that reserve will be used by the company. So it is not like a free reserve which can be utilized or which can be paid to the shareholders as a dividend. But free reserve, which I was talking about, free reserve is a reserve which can be utilized by the company for the purpose of payment of dividend to the company as well, to the shareholders, payment of dividend to the shareholders as well, or maybe for the purpose of buyback. But as far as this security premium is concerned, that is not at all a free reserve, number one. Number two, it's like a capital reserve, and it can be utilized for the purpose of buyback. So it can be utilized for the purpose of buyback. So how company will go for buyback? Number one, whatever the amount lying with the company in the free reserve, that can be utilized. So make sure the company should have that much of reserves. So company can't go for buyback. Let's say if company does not have balance in the bank account, company does not have any liquidity, and company does not have any reserves, no free reserve, no security premium account, and company has not proceeds of issue of any other kind of security. So why company will go for buyback? Ultimately, if company is going for a buyback, that means company will have to give that money to the shareholders. If my company is, let's say my total capital is and reserves in totality, I have, let's say 1 crore, and I have to pay 25 lakhs, that which is 25%. So that means the company should have 25 lakhs. Maybe that's lying in the reserves, maybe lying in the security premium account. So if company does not have those kind of reserves or security premium account, then from where company will do the buyback Obviously, company can't do the buyback, or if the company does not have these kind of reserves. So law says make sure the company should have free reserves, the company should have securities premium account, and or there may be a possibility company can go for the buyback out of the proceeds of issue of any other kind of securities. But make sure not of the same class, which says company cannot do that. What company cannot do that is, I am issuing equity shares. So I am issuing equity shares to the company, to the shareholders, and whatever the proceeds which I am getting, whatever the money that I am getting from the shareholders, from the investor, out of that I am going to buy back the equity shares. Now see how it is possible. You will also say that's how it can be possible. That today the company has issued equity shares to me, and tomorrow company is saying out of that money I'm going to buy back your shares. So that's the law says proceeds of the issue of other specified securities, but not of the same kind of securities or shares which company is going to buy back. The company is planning for buyback. But obvious, because in any case it cannot be like first taking money from the shareholders, then again on the next day giving it back to the shareholder. So it cannot be done so, right? Now it says in simple words, for the purpose of buyback, the sources would be the three sources. Number one is free reserves, number two is securities premium account, number three is proceeds of issue of any shares or otherwise other specified securities. If company issues security premium account, then company has to create just like a entry in this in the balance sheet of a company. So when we are utilizing the securities premium account, but we have to create a capital redemption reserve as well. So just a not that much of relevant for this buyback purpose, but yes, whenever company utilizes security premium account, in that case the company has to create another reserve, which is a capital redemption reserve. So where the company has to switch the amount, because to show that in the balance sheet, the whatever the amount the lying in a security premium account that has been utilized for the purpose of buyback, so that will go to capital redemption reserve account, right? And make sure if a company is planning for buyback, if company is going for the buyback, make sure the company should have a proper authority as per its article of association. If it is not there, then first company will have to alter its article as per the law. Then make sure the company should have that power. The company should have that authority in the articles of the association of the company, where company will go for, where it will be allowed to the company, it will be authorized by the company's main document, memorandum and article of association, that company can go for buyback. And make sure approval of shareholders is required by passing a special resolution. So whenever the company has to take certain major decision in a company, wherever the company wants to do something which has an impact on the investor, so we have to take the approval of shareholders. So maybe you will call their meeting, or maybe you will be taking the approval through postal ballot, whatever. So as per your convenience. So whenever the company is planning for the buyback, make sure we need to take the approval of shareholders by passing a special resolution. Just sort of, let's say, majority approval, like shareholders will approve that, yes, we agree with that, we are giving approval to the shareholders to go for the buyback. Now how much buyback that can be done? Like as I said, maximum buyback that company can do is 25%, right? With the approval of shareholders. If a company wants to avoid the route of shareholders, I don't want to go to the shareholder unnecessarily, I don't want to take the approval of shareholders, or maybe sometime it is not feasible, sometime practically it is not possible for the company to take the approval of shareholders. In that case, what company can do is, company up to a certain limit, company can take the approval of the board and can go for the buyback, which can be the less than 25%, but maximum that can be the 10%. But that is only if a company does not want, or maybe company does not want to go to the shareholders, or maybe it is not possible for the company to take the approval of shareholders. So what company can do, restrict yourself to the approval of the board, which is quite easy as compared to the shareholders, which is quite easy to take the approval of board. So company, by taking the approval of board without going to the shareholder, without approaching the shareholder, company can take the approval of the board, right? The company can take the approval of the board, but in that case, company can only go for buyback maximum 10% of the paid up equity capital and free reserves of the company. Maximum 10%. So now it is up to the company. It is up to the company. If you think you can take the approval of shareholders, then go for 25% maximum limit, right? And if company thinks ki company cannot go to the shareholder, or maybe it is not possible for the company to approach the shareholders, you want to restrict yourself only to the approval of the board, then make sure in that case you can do only maximum 10%. So it is a company which has to decide whether to go for 10% or whether to go for the 25%. So it's up to the company. Absolutely. The buyback is maximum 25% of aggregate of total paid up share capital and free reserves of the company, right? Right now, maximum 25%. That means, again, I'll just repeat again. If with the approval of the board only, it is 10%. Only 10% of the paid up equity capital and free reserves. Free reserves include security premium account as well for this buyback. If company can take the approval of shareholder, if company can easily approach the shareholders, then it can be maximum 25%. 25% of total capital, total paid up capital, which includes equity and preference both, and free reserves. So here free reserves includes again security premium as well for the purpose of this buyback. So it can be 25% of equity, 25% of capital and free reserves. But for that you will have to take the approval of shareholder. So this is now basically the complete total amount of buyback which company can give it to the shareholders. Total buyback, that is total amount of buyback, which is 25%. Provided, again, we have the proviso here is in a financial year. So basically there are two things which investor that has to understand is, number one is total amount of buyback. I am talking about in terms of money. How much money that amount company can give, which says maximum 25% of capital and reserves amount. Let's say, I'll just give you with an example. Okay, I'll just come to that example. Let's say now total capital of the company's paid up capital we'll talk about is 90 lakhs. Equity share capital, 9 lakhs equity shares at the rate of 10 each. Preference shares capital paid up is 10 lakhs. The total paid up capital is 1 crore. I'm just giving a very simple example, and reserve the company has is 1 lakh, and the security premium account of the company which has is 15 lakhs. Now see, capital is 1 crore, including equity and preference both. Free reserves are 1 lakh and the security premium is 15 lakhs. Now if company is planning to come up with a buyback, right? If company is planning to come up with a buyback only with the approval of board, company is not planning to go to the shareholders. So company is planning to come up with a buyback only with the approval of the board. So which is 10% of equity capital, not preference, which is 90 lakhs plus free reserves, which includes security premium as well. So it will be 90 lakhs equity capital, 1 lakh your free reserves, 15 lakhs is your security premium account. So that will come to 10% will be 10 lakh 60,000. That is total amount that which would be given to the shareholders. And if company is coming with a 25%, let's have another example. If company is planning to go to the shareholders, where company can take the approval of shareholder by passing special resolution, then again 25% would be aggregate of total capital. Let's say 1 crore is a total capital. Now here we will include equity and preference both. And it talks about the aggregate of paid up capital. In 10% it talks about equity capital. So now it would be aggregate of paid up capital, which is 1 crore 15 lakhs security premium account, 1 lakh is we have free reserves. So the total amount money that would be given to the shareholders under the route of buyback, that would be 29 lakhs. So this is a maximum amount. It can be less than 29 lakhs, but in any case it cannot be more than 29 lakhs. So maximum amount that can be given by the company to the shareholders under the route of buyback by taking approval of shareholders, so that would be 29 lakhs. This is a 25%. Now out of this, how much would be the equity shares? So that is 29 lakhs is basically the amount which company will give. But how much would be the number of equity shares that company can opt for, the company can buy back, which says 25% of the equity share capital. So now total equity share we have is 9 lakhs. 9 lakhs. So now we are talking about units. We are talking about equity share which company can buy back. So now just see the example very carefully. The maximum shares. Earlier, I was not talking about shares. I was talking about total amount of buyback, which includes 25% of aggregate of paid up capital, reserves and security premium account. Now here I'm talking about the number of shares which company can go for buyback is like 25% of equity shares. Now number of shares, now units I'm going to talk about is 9 lakh equity share the company has. 25% of 9 lakh is 2,25,000 shares. Now that means now if company is coming up with a buyback, if company is planning for buyback, make sure the maximum shares which company will go for buyback is 2,25,000 shares, and the amount which would be given to them, to those equity shareholders holding 2,25,000 shares, that amount will be 29 lakhs. Right? So now total amount would be 29 lakhs. Maximum that amount can be 29 lakhs, and the number of shares which will be bought by the company, that will be 2,25,000. Then accordingly, if you will divide the total amount with the number of maximum number of equity shares permissible as per the law, that will be, if you will divide this, that will be the price at which company will go for the buyback. That will be the price. So 29 lakhs divided by 2,25,000 shares, that will be my price. So at that price, company will opt for the buyback, and make sure that price, obviously the company will go for the valuation as well. Without valuation, company cannot go for the buyback. So there has to be a proper valuation. You have to support a document which should be given to the shareholder as well, on what basis you have calculated the price, on what basis you are calculating, on what basis you are saying the company is going to buy back, or company is going for the buyback at 80 rupees per share, or maybe 90 rupees per share, or maybe 10 rupees per share, whatever. So the valuation, proper valuation would be done by the company, right? Now, make sure if company is going for the buyback, so another the point has to be taken care of by the companies. Obviously, your equity will come down. So I'm going to buy back my equity and reserves. My equity, my net worth will come down because I have bought back my equity shares from the company. Obviously, my debt will be increased. So make sure, law says, as per the provisions, your debt equity ratio. So there is a benchmark for the debt equity ratio, which is basically the 2:1. Law says make sure your debt equity ratio should not exceed the 2:1. So it should not hamper, it should not have the impact on your debt. And make sure all the shares should be fully paid up. 1 year, there is a gap. If company is coming with a buyback offer, make sure between two buybacks, there should be a gap of 1 year. So whenever you have closed the buyback, make sure that another buyback will not be issued by the company for the next 1 year. Condition of buyback, we have already discussed that, with the approval of the board, the 10% buyback can be done with the equity capital and free reserve, otherwise 25% of total capital along with the free reserves and security premium with the approval of shareholders. Example, we have already covered it. Maximum number of units that can be about. Debt equity ratio, I said it cannot be more than 2:1 in any case. Make sure if company is coming up with a buyback, so it should not be more than 2:1, right? capital redemption account. That's it. So now, simple is whatever we discussed. The one last point is just make sure if company is coming with a buyback, that means today you're going to buy back shares from the shareholders. So make sure there should not be a possibility to come up with the issue of further shares in future. So again, there's no possibility. There's not at all. There's a possibility. Today I'm going to buy back. Today I've returned money to the company, and after 1 month I'm asking money from the shareholders by issuing more shares. So which is not at all practically possible. Law say there has to be a 6 months cooling period. Within that 6 months, make sure the company should not come up with the issue of shares again, or the same shares. Like today I've purchased equity shares from the shareholder. Tomorrow I am issuing shares to the shareholders. So law says if you had a plan, if you had a plan of issuing shares to the company, then why you came up for the buyback? So make sure there has to be a cooling period of 6 months. So within 6 months, the company cannot issue shares. Then accordingly, company will issue offer letters to you. Company will issue offer letter. Any shareholders whosoever wants to buy back, who wants to accept the buyback offer, make sure it is not mandatory. It is not mandatory for the company even to come up with a buyback. But if company is coming with a buyback offer, make sure it is not mandatory for you to accept it. So it's up to you. So keeping in mind your calculations, keeping in mind the market value, keeping in mind the book value, keeping in mind the value which company is coming with a buyback. So according within that limit, so you have to decide whether you want to choose for the buyback or not. Right? So this is all from my side. So for the buyback, we'll come up with the more, just to share more topics and more knowledge with the investor very soon. Till then, take care. Bye-bye.
क्रिटिकल है बट वी आर ट्राइंग।
ये सब हुआ कैसे?
एक फोन आया था राजेश के पास। उसने कहा कि उनकी 1 करोड़ की लॉटरी निकली है और उसके लिए उसने बैंक डिटेल्स मांगी। राजेश ने सारी डिटेल्स दे दी। 1 घंटे के अंदर ही उनके बैंक अकाउंट से सारा पैसा साफ हो गया और वो यहाँ आ गए। हार्ट अटैक आया है।
देखा आपने, आपकी जरा सी असावधानी क्या कर सकती है। डिजिटल फ्रॉड करने वालों से सावधान रहें। अपनी बैंक डिटेल्स, अपना डेबिट या क्रेडिट कार्ड नंबर, एक्सपायरी डेट, सीवीवी, ओटीपी, पिन कभी किसी को ना बताएं। सावधान रहें, समझदार बने।
IEPF अथॉरिटी द्वारा जनहित में जारी।
हाँ जी सुरेश जी, रिटायरमेंट के बाद जो प्रोविडेंट फंड आएगा उसका क्या करेंगे?
कुछ खास प्लान नहीं है, पड़ा रहेगा बैंक में, ब्याज आता रहेगा और क्या।
सुरेश जी, बैंक से कितना ब्याज आएगा? एक नई स्कीम बताता हूँ, उसमें पैसे लगा दो। साल भर में दुगने बल्कि चौगुना हो जाएगा। हाँ, बस कुछ नए मेंबर्स बनाने।
नहीं सुरेश जी, इन सब फालतू चक्करों में मत पड़िए कि नए मेंबर बनाना, रातों रात करोड़पति बनाना, ऐसे सपने दिखाने वाली स्कीम से बचकर रहें। आप लालच में आकर नहीं, समझदारी से निवेश करें। नए मेंबर बनाओ, वर्ल्ड टूर पे जाओ, कमीशन पाओ या उपहार घर ले जाओ। ऐसे सपने दिखाने वाली स्कीम से बचकर रहें। ऐसी स्कीम्स धोखा हो सकती हैं।
IEPF अथॉरिटी, कॉर्पोरेट कार्य मंत्रालय द्वारा जनहित में जारी।
यार वो मेरे बचपन का दोस्त है, वो क्यों मुझसे झूठ कहने लगा? वो कह रहा था इस स्कीम में पैसा लगाने पर 6 महीने में 10 के 20,000 हो जाएंगे।
और तूने मान लिया?
ऐसा ऑफर कौन छोड़ता है? 10,000 के 20,000।
एक काम कर, ये ले 100 रुपये पकड़ना और जाके 10 किलो लड्डू लेके आ।
अबे पागल है क्या? 100 रुपए में 10 किलो लड्डू आते हैं? अबे इसके तो 1 किलो लड्डू भी नहीं आएंगे।
जब इतना जानता है तो ये नहीं जानता कि 6 महीने में 10,000 के 20,000 नहीं होते। समझदारी बढ़ा, लालच नहीं।
लालच में ना आए, समझदारी बढ़ाएं। IEPF अथॉरिटी द्वारा जनहित में जारी।
कैनवास में रंग भरकर उसे जीवित बना देना एक कला कहलाती है। इसी तरह अपनी जमा पूंजी बढ़ाकर जिंदगी बना लेना भी एक कला ही है। मैंने भी ये स्टूडियो ऐसे ही बनाया है, पाई पाई जमा करके।
मुझे भी लोग फ़ोन करते हैं, मेल करते हैं, मुझे कन्विंस करते हैं कि उनकी इन्वेस्टमेंट स्कीम्स बहुत अच्छी है।
उन लोगों के भी रेफरेंसेस देते हैं जिन्हें फ़ायदा हुआ है, पर मैं अपनी रिसर्च खुद करती हूँ। आपको भी यही करना चाहिए। सरकार के कुछ वेबसाइट्स हैं जिन पर जाकर आप अपने निवेश से संबंधित पूरी जानकारी ले सकते हैं, और ये वेबसाइट्स हैं मैं अपने पैसों को लेकर सावधान रहती हूँ, आप भी रहिए।
IEPF अथॉरिटी द्वारा जनहित में जारी।
Learners, welcome to this session in which we are going to discuss about wind as a geological agent. Wind forms variety of landforms. Myself, Benithar Deshmukh, and along with me are Professor Minal Mishra and Professor R. Bhaskar from the Geology discipline of the School of Sciences. The topic of discussion is relevant to the first semester course BGYCT 131 Physical and Structural Geology, and also relevant to the sixth semester elective course BGYET 147 Geomorphology and Geotectonics of the BSc General programs. Learners, we see a variety of landforms in different parts of our country. Like say, if we come from north to south, we see beautiful hills, then rivers, plains, then desert. In the desert, we see various dunes, other landforms, and when we come further south, we see some caves and cliffs and beaches. These landforms are developed due to various natural geomorphic processes by various geological agents like glaciers, river, wind, underground water, and oceans. In the block 2 of the Earth surface, block 2 Earth surface processes of the course Physical and Structural Geology, we have studied that there are various natural processes which are responsible for development of various kinds of landforms. The landform that we see are the result of various constructive and destructive forces, and we have also studied in that block that there are two kinds of natural processes or earth surface processes, and we call them as exogenic and endogenic processes. External or the exogenic processes are the processes which operate at or near the earth surface, whereas the endogenic processes like earthquakes, volcanic activities, they operate within the earth. So in this session, we would focus on the wind as a geological agent. Before discussing about the various kinds of landforms, that erosional and depositional landforms, we would discuss start with wind to understand wind as a transportation agent. Wind plays an important role in sculpturing the Earth's surface. Wind is an important geological agent of erosion and deposition in the arid and semi-arid regions. And sun heats the Earth's surface, and the air in contact is also heated up. Once the air is heated, it becomes lighter and it moves upward, and the cold air fills the emptied space. This sets the air in motion, and the wind moves from the areas of higher pressure to the areas of lower pressure. And this uneven distribution of the solar heat controls wind over the Earth's surface. Wind is a turbulent fluid in the same way as we know of the running water as it transports sediments. Wind typically flows at a greater velocity than the water, and it has a lower density and can carry only clay and silt particles as suspended load. It moves sand and larger particles along the ground as bed load, and wind acts as an agent of erosion and deposition just like water. Wind is effective in transporting and depositing unconsolidated sand, silt and dust size particles. Wind can carry dust to great heights and many kilometers. And it transports enormous quantities of wind-blown material. We know that moisture dampens the action of the wind, and we regard the water table as the ultimate base level for erosion of wind. The base level is the theoretical lowest level to which the land will erode, ultimately equal to the sea level. And we also know that vegetation also checks the activities of wind. The stages of transportation are the functions of wind velocity and sediment load, like rolling, traction and saltation or suspension. The heavier particles and the massive rock fragments are transported by rolling or dragging along the ground, and this phenomena is called as traction. Sediments which are too large or heavy to be carried in suspension by wind are moved as bed load, either as saltation or by rolling and sliding. Saltation occurs closer to the ground, with sand-sized grains moving up and down in the jumping motion closer to the surface in the direction of the blowing wind. The saltating sand particles usually move near the surface, and even when winds are strong, the silt and the clay-sized particles are carried in suspension. The suspended grains can reach great altitudes, and it can travel even up to the thousands of kilometers. Even though these particles are much smaller and lighter than the sand-sized particles, the wind usually first starts moving the later. Now we have discussed about the wind as a transportation agent, and my colleague Professor R. Bhaskar would discuss about the erosional landforms.
Thank you, Professor Deshmukh. You have very nicely explained wind as a transportation medium and what are the activities it does. The wind is from the alien word alien, that means the Greek god, the wind. And wind is responsible for a number of things. And there are three basic features which one has to understand in erosion of erosional characteristics of wind. One is abrasion, then you have the attrition, then you have the deflation. These are the three things which are important. Now, wind erosion is also called as aeolian erosion, and there are three processes as I mentioned: deflation, abrasion and attrition. Let us now see, learners, what is the difference between these three terms. Now when you say abrasion, that means to rub When the wind blows, it carries sand particles along with it, and it acts like a sandpaper, and it affects the outcrops and the rocks and rubs it. That is called abrasion. Now, what is deflation? Deflation means blowing out. Just like you use a vacuum cleaner to suck the air, if you throw the air out, that is the deflation. Wind, because of its energy, moves particles and then creates deflation basins also in this. Then the third process which is to be understood is attrition. When the particles move in the air, they collide with each other. When they collide with each other, they rub each other and reduce their size, and this is called attrition. So basically there are three features which result in three characteristics which result in number of erosional landforms. We will see some of them. If you see this three process I have explained, we can see the slide. Abrasion, it is rubbing, grinding, polishing of rock surfaces. Then the next one you have is the attrition. You can see attrition is the wear and tear of the sediments. Then you have the deflation, which I already said to you. So these are the three processes. Now let us see what are the erosional landforms which are formed. Now the first one which is important is deflation basin. Now what is deflation basin? When the winds carry the lighter particles, when it blows, it causes a depression. And these depressions can be up to 1.5 kilometer long and a few meter deep. And sometimes these can go up to the water table. That is the maximum limit it can go. And oasis can be formed. So this deflation basin is formed. See the figure in the screen. You can see the prevailing wind. What is happening? Sand is blown out because of deflation. A depression is caused, which is by the deflation, and the water which is at the bottom, there is a water table you can see in this diagram, aquifer. When this hits the bottom of the aquifer, then this becomes wet, damp, and if it becomes more damp, then it can accumulate water and water can seep out. So this is the feature produced because of deflation. The next one is the desert pavement. Now you know wind carries the lighter particles and the heavier particles are left behind. For example, the fine grained particles will be taken by wind, whereas pebbles and boulders which are too large for wind to transport will be left behind. So what will happen over a period of time? All the finer particles will be carried away, and what will be left is the coarse particles, and they may come closer together because of movement, and this will form the desert pavement. And this is again a erosional landform feature typically formed by wind. You can see the next diagram in the screen. It shows how the movement is there. You can see that moisture mixture of coarse and fine particles at the surface, and the movement is taking place. The fine particles are removed, and when fine particles are moved, only pebbles and boulders are left behind. Oh, because of movement they get consolidated. They not in real sense getting cemented, but they come together and they form the desert pavement, and this is typical in the arid regions. So there is no vegetation, and you can see. And the next structure which is formed is the mushroom table or zeugans. What is this? If there is an alternate of hard and soft rock, what will happen? The soft rock will get differentially weathered compared to the hard rock, and the hard rock will project as a ridge, and this kind of structure is represents like a mushroom table. And you can see the next diagram which I am showing in the screen. This kind of arrangement is there, the parallel arrangement of soft and hard rock. Now what happens if this it is not parallel and it is vertical? The same geomorphic feature is produced, and this is called yardang. Yardang is the same, only thing that it is vertical and it resembles the hull of a boat, and it is 3 times longer compared to the width, and this may stand up to 20 meters in height. Now you can see the diagram, next diagram. Here there are also hard and soft rocks, but what is there? It is vertical, and the soft rocks create a trough and the hard rock get projected, and these form the yardang. Then we have the next feature, which is the pedestal rocks. The name pedestal itself tell you that it stands on a high pedestal. Why this occurs? Suppose there is a homogeneous rock, and you know when there is homogeneous rock, The wind carries the heavier particles at the bottom. When it goes higher, it will not be able to. So what it does, it differentially erodes the height based on the height of that feature, and it will erode more in the bottom than in the top. So what will happen? In the top, it will appear as if something heavy is standing on something slender body, and this is called a pedestal. And you can see the next diagram I am showing in this. This is a typical field photograph in Thar Desert. You have the big rock here, and it is standing. Why? Because the heavier particles are carried in the bottom, they abrade and erode it more than the top. So this is another feature. Then we have blowouts. Blowouts are nothing but broad shallow caves in hills which result due to wind erosion. Sometimes you can also have flat, the depressions caused, again they can be occupied by water. Then you can have the important feature which is typical of the wind erosional feature is ventifacts. These are nothing but the boulders and rock surfaces which get abraded, pitted, etched, grooved or polished by wind driven sand. So what happens when wind blows, sand blasting take place, one part of that face gets polished, what you can see. Then if the wind direction changes again, so it gets basically more angular, and you can see the original border shape is different. So this is the typical erosional feature, which is the feature of the erosional landform. Now I would request, now that you know the transportational characteristics, you know the erosional landform characteristics, I would request Professor Meenal Mishra to talk about the depositional features of the landforms.
Thank you, Professor Bhaskar. As Professor Bhaskar has discussed about many interesting erosional landforms that are caused by wind action, similarly, we have many landforms which are formed due to the wind action, depositional landforms that are formed due to the wind action. So see, wind is an excellent agent of sorting. When wind lifts up the sediment, so what happens? The wind has that capacity, it can sort silt, clay according to the different sizes. As Professor Bhaskar told, pebbles and cobbles, they are left behind, and the wind lifts up silt and clay size particles. So that is one aspect. And similarly, when the wind action takes place, with a period of time, what happens? The wind velocity, it decreases, or you can say the energy decreases, and due to this decrease in energy, the wind, it will cause the formation of these depositional landforms. And because it has got the capacity of sorting, so what happens that due to the different fractions, that very excellent sorting also takes place. So let us discuss about some depositional, with these two basic concepts, let us discuss about some depositional landforms which you get in desert. Definitely the wind action, it shows its presence, or it develops landforms where you have barren land, where you don't have trees, where the vegetation is minimum. So when the wind blows, the obstruction takes place due to the presence of some cliff. It can be trees, it can be bushes, it can be some building. So there is reduction in wind velocity, and along with reduction, as Professor Deshmukh told, that the moisture it dampens the wind. So what happens? Due to the enhancement of the moisture, the wind velocity is also decreased. Next please. Yeah, so a very fundamental or very important landform that develops, that is loess. Loess, it is caused due to the sorting of clay and silt size sediments, and this accumulation, it takes place. Loess is clastic, and it is non-stratified, and it is calcareous. Lot of calcium calcareous nodules you find there, and it is a mixture of porous, friable sediments, and then it is pale yellow or buff in color. The grains are loose and they are angular, and you will find some little bit sorting and polishing, and the minerals that are predominantly found in loess or in loessic sediments, they are quartz, feldspar, mica, and some other heavy minerals. See, in northern China, you find very thick loessic deposits, more than 300 meters. Here in our campus, IGNOU campus at Maidangadi, we have this particular photograph which you see on the screen. This is taken from our IGNOU campus at Maidangadi. It is these are loessic sediments, and these are deposited over Delhi quartzite. Definitely, quartzite is a rock on weathering. Because it comprises of silica oxide, SiO2, so it is more than 99% silica oxide. So when the weathering of quartzite takes place, it doesn't form such big pile of sediment over it. But you know, these sediments which you see in the photograph I showed you earlier, they are transported from Rajasthan, from northwestern side of India through northwesterlies, and it is deposited over these quartzitic rocks in Delhi, or in this particular case in IGNOU campus. Then the next one is sand dunes. This is also a very important landform. Before coming to sand dunes, let me tell you about the three types of desert. There are three types of desert. A rocky desert, it consists of barren, hard and rocky plateaus, like in case of Sahara desert, and a very negligible amount of sand is present. In case of stony desert, it is mostly composed of, or it constitutes of rocky waste. As Professor Bhaskar told you, that the fine grained sediments, they are lifted, and the things that remains behind, these are cobbles and pebbles. So it comprises of these rocky waste. For example, in Bikaner you have the desert that is mostly stony or rocky desert, and then the third one is sandy. It comprises mostly of sand, and it has got poor vegetation, very less vegetation. For example, Pokhran in Rajasthan. So let us come to the next slide, that is what are the conditions of formation of these sand dunes. You must have seen that in desert you have kilometers and kilometers extending these areas. They are comprised of these sand dunes. So what are the conditions of the formation? First of all, you need to have an abundant supply of loose sediment, and then the sand should have sufficient energy to move these, like wind should have the velocity so that these sediments, they can move. Then there should be an obstacle, or it can be a cliff, it can be a vegetative cover, then arid climate. And now let us see what is a sand dune. Sand dune, it is a mount of the sand which is deposited with a crest. Now in the next diagram you can see this mound like shape. This is a cross section of a sand dune. You have a leeward side which is very steep, and you have a windward side that is very gentle. So in the direction of the movement of the wind, that is windward side, and the opposite one is the leeward side. And then the highest point you see, that is the crest. You can also see a photograph in the top in the slide. The top one is a photograph from Jaisalmer, that is this sandy desert. The next one, please. Now, you know, it's very interesting to note that these sand dunes, they are not stagnant, they are not fixed, they keep on moving. Like what happens, you just see on just next please, you see this diagram. What happens when the sand dune, it migrates from one place to another? It moves forward in the windward direction. So the sand grains, they are lifted from the windward side and they are dropped on the leeward side. Then again the sand is lifted from the windward side and it drops on the leeward side. So you see in this diagram how this sand dune is migrating. It is very interesting to note this phenomena, and this is a very common phenomena which takes place in the sandy deserts. Now these sand dunes, they can be classified based on their, see on the screen you can see this sand dune is advancing and the movements of the sand grain can be noticed. This is how it happens in the desert like Jaisalmer. The left one is a structure of a stationary dune and the right one is the migrating dune. Next one please. So based on the structure, these dunes, they can be classified into three principal types. First three types of dunes, they are asymmetrical. That means that they have gentle windward side and steep sloping this leeward side. And the fourth dune, that is it is very complex. It has got many arms and ridges. Why? Because the wind is flowing from the different directions. The next slide you can see it is the cross section of a barkhan. It is a diagrammatic representation of the barkhan in the photograph above, and below in it is the real field photograph of a dune barkhan from Thar desert. Now barkhan has got two horns and it is the leeward side is steep concave, and these barkhans also migrate as the other dunes migrate. Next one please. Now this one is also a type of sand dune. It is known as safe dune. It is similar to barkhan as I told you earlier, but one wing or one horn is missing due to the change in the wind direction. There is shifting of one horn, and this is also caused due to the converging winds. So these are the classification. Just to sum up the classification you have in your before I come to summing up, one thing more, there is another landform, that is playa. Playa is a flat area at the bottom of the desert basin and the water collects, and when the water collects, this playa, it can form an oasis. Oasis, you know, it is a fertile part of the desert. I mean it is a fertile patch in the desert. So where this intersects the water table, oasis form. Just to sum up, you can see on your screens that this particular table is from your self-learning materials, and we have compared these different types of sand dunes in terms of their shape, wind characteristics, environment of deposition, grain size characteristics, and we have discussed barkhan, transverse and parabolic, longitudinal and star dunes. Now learners, I think you must have found this session very interesting, and it is time to sum up. So we have discussed the wind action, wind as a transport agent and its erosional and depositional landform that result from the wind action. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Indira Gandhi National Open University, which is known for its abbreviation IGNOU, is a mega university in the world having a mandate of reaching to the unreached. This is a A++ NAC accredited university which is more emphasized on the online learning education as well as the open and distance learning system. Center for Online Education is the pioneer in disseminating the education through online mode under the ambit of Indira Gandhi National Open University. Now, with the change of time, with the change of technological era, this university have moved from brick and mortar system to click and mortar system. IGNOU is now online from ODL system to online learning, a beauty of the online program which IGNOU have launched from 2020 onwards, and till date this number is going on as far as the programs are concerned, as far as the enrollments are concerned. Till date, Center of Online have 38 programs. These programs are bifurcated into master's program, bachelor's degree program, certificate programs, diploma programs and postgraduate diploma programs. Out of these 38 programs, we have some 4 flagship programs like MBA, BCA, MCA, BCom. And Center for Online Education had developed their own learning management system backed with Moodle, and this learning management system have followed a 4-quadrant approach. So the first quadrant is more emphasizing on video part, that how we are going to connect with the learners, and then the second quadrant is more emphasizing on the self-learning material. Then we have assessment, and finally the examination and evaluation part is there. So this 4-quadrant approach is holistic in nature and takes into consideration how the learners are going to be evaluated and examined. As far as the support system is concerned, IGNOU follows the 3-tier approach, that is the headquarters, regional centers and LSCs, which we usually call the learning support centers. With the help of this 3-tier approach, we are in touch with our learners in the ODL mode as well as online learners. We have a dedicated campus placement cells where learners used to be placed once they accomplish their course, and a huge alumni bank of millions of students. This is the USP of the IGNOU. The interested learners can visit to www.iop.ignouonline.ac.in, the particular portal, and get themselves registered if they are interested.
Welcome learners to the teleconferencing session on geological work of underground water. I am Kakuli Gogoi. Along with me is Professor Menal Mishra and Professor R. Bhaskar. We are from Geology Discipline, School of Sciences, IGNOU. And today's session is related to the BSCG program of School of Sciences, IGNOU, related to geology courses. To give you just an introduction about the geology courses of BSCG program, you see there are 4 core courses. Along with all the 4 courses, there are also lab component. that is 4 credit core courses, is associated with 2 credit lab courses for all the 4 semesters. Like in the first semester, we have BGY CT 131. CT is for the core course. The code is related to the core course, that is BGY CT 131, that is physical and structural geology. Then in the second the semester, we have BGY CT 133, this crystallography, mineralogy and economic geology. Then the other core course is BGY 135, that is related to petrology, where we study all the igneous, sedimentary and metamorphic rocks. Then the other core course is BGY CT 137, that is stratigraphy and paleontology. So today's session that is related to the first semester course BGY 131, physical and structural geology, and this is also related to the elective course of the sixth semester, that is BGY ET. ET is for elective course 147, that is geomorphology and geotectonics. So in BGY 131, this has been all the geological processes have been discussed in block 2, and this unit, the unit 7 is related to today's discussion. And in elective course, that is geomorphology and geotectonic, you will study in unit 9, that is crust and lacustrine landforms. So to begin with today's discussion, that is geological work of underground water, let me just tell you that you know that water occurs in the earth's surface in 3 forms, that is solid in the form of glaciers, then liquid in the form of water, and gas in the form of vapors, and they combine to constitute the hydrologic cycle, and which appears more or less to be stable. So you see, when water evaporates and from the ocean surface, and they form vapors, and this is collected in the atmosphere, and we all know that the water it precipitates down on the earth's surface in the term of you see rainfall and snowfall, and this rainwater this flows either as a runoff that generates steams which combine together to form a river, and this rainwater it percolates down to form the underground water, and this underground water is also termed as groundwater, and we also term as subsurface water. So here in this figure you can see in the upper part, as you can see, this is the soil where the plants are grown, and just beneath that soil you can see this is the unsaturated zone, that is why we call as unsaturated zone. In this part you will see that these are pores filled with air and are not completely filled with water. So this portion is known as unsaturated zone, and we also call this unsaturated zone as the vadose zone. And just below this unsaturated zone, this zone is called saturated zone, and this is also known as groundwater zone. Because why it is saturated? Because these pores are completely filled with water. And here you can see there is a red mark. This mark we call as water table or groundwater table, and this is the boundary between the saturated zone and the unsaturated zone, and this marks the upper limit of this saturated zone. So in groundwater, this it completely depends upon this saturated zone. And after that you see there are some factors that controls the underground water. So the first factor, that is its climate. You see, when there is a change in climate, and this affects the amount of infiltration, and so is the deeper percolation, and this depends everything. The research of groundwater is related with these conditions, and when there is a rise in temperature, obviously there is this evaporation is high, and this also depends with the refill of the groundwater below the ground. And the other factor which is related to this groundwater is topography, and this topography is you see, it determines the direction and water flow, which may be due to the differences in hydraulic potential and the aquifer thickness and groundwater level. Here I am telling about this aquifer thickness. Aquifer thickness is, this is nothing but the underground layer of water bearing this permeable rocks, which we say as aquifer in terms of geology. And the, as I already discussed about the there in the diagram, what water table is, and this water table, this is often, but you see, not always they flow the topography like upward or downward tilts of the land over them. The next characteristics is the rock characteristics, and this rock characteristic, it depends on two terms, that is permeability and porosity. What do you mean by porosity? Porosity is the percentage of total volume or the amount of space available between the particles. That is, the pore spaces present between particles in soil, it may be sediment and also the sedimentary rock. So porosity of rock, this is the measure of the ability of rock to hold the fluid. And what is permeability? Permeability is the property and capacity of earth materials to transmit fluid. That is, permeability is dependent not only on porosity but also on the size of the pores and their interconnectivity. So porosity, this is the measure to ease the flow of the fluid in the porous solids. So this is about the factors affecting the groundwater. Now Professor Minal Mishra, she will discuss about the manifestation of underground water.
Thank you, Dr. Kakuli. Very nicely, Dr. Kakuli, you have explained about how groundwater occurs and some very fundamental terms which are associated with groundwater. So, learners, now let us look at the surface manifestations of groundwater. How you find this groundwater on the surface? First one, let me tell you, it is springs. Springs, these are natural openings. Many times you must have traveled in the mountainous areas and suddenly you must have seen some water seepage and some springs, some water coming out. So these are the natural openings through which water that comes on the surface and it flows on the surface. Second one is hot spring or thermal spring. When this hot water comes, in case of spring, it is cool and fresh water. But when this hot water comes out of these springs, so this heating is due to some source that is below the surface. Many times the water is near the magma chamber, or it may be due to some other reason. So these springs, in these springs you find this hot water coming out. Many times you must have heard about sulfurous springs, in which the source of sulfur is there, and that sulfur, it gets dissolved into this groundwater and it comes in the form of springs. For example, there used to be one sulfur spring in Shahstardara area of Dehradun district. Then ordinary wells, common wells which you find when the water, it is found at the water table. This water table, it indicates the depth of the water in particular area, as Dr. Kakuli told you. Then tube wells. Tube wells are also ordinary wells, but the water is withdrawn mechanically. Then there is one term that is known as artesian wells. Artesian wells, these are special types of wells in which water escapes to the surface driven by water table in an aquifer. Now this word aquifer has come. What is it? Aquifer is an underground layer of water bearing permeable rock, and there are a lot of rock fractures and unconsolidated sedimentation. So these are the surface manifestations. Now here on your screens you can see one natural spring on the left side of the photograph. It is a small natural spring, and then you can this is, you know, this is the source of Kaveri river. It is located in Western Ghats, and the place is known as Tal Kaveri. Tal means Talab, and Kaveri, that is river Kaveri. So river Kaveri, it originates from this small spring. Then on the right side you see that person, he is pouring some hot water in pots. He is getting this hot water from the hot spring at Manikaran, that is in Kullu district of Himachal Pradesh. Now the next one, let us come to the geyser. See this this photograph on the right side, sorry, on the left side, it is geyser. This is from New Zealand, and the mechanism behind the geyser you can see on your right side. What happens? There are fractures and fissures in the this rock, and this hot water, it flows. It is, these fractures are all interconnected, and the hot water it flows, and through a very small vent you can see this hot water coming out with lot of pressure. So we call this as geyser. Now I have told you about the surface manifestations. Let us come to erosional landforms, landslide and the caves. So we found in this this groundwater, it enters the fissures and cracks that are present in the rock, and you know water is a very good lubricant, and there are fractures in the rock, and what happens because of this water penetrating the fractures, there is slippage and unstable mass. It slips downwards under the influence of gravity. The next one is caves. See, caves are mostly found in limestone country, the places where you get limestone rock. Limestone is calcium carbonate, and what happens that the slightly acidic water, that is H2CO3, that is carbonic acid, it reacts with the limestone CaCO3 and it dissolves the limestone, and you get the formation of caves. You can see on your screens, this is limestone cave from Khasi Hills. So you can see this cavity that is formed due to the dissolution of limestone. Next one please. Now the another landform is underground channels. What happens? The dissolution of rocks, that is carbonate, in a limestone country where this groundwater flows. So these are small sort of tunnels they are formed, and because of the dissolution of limestone, and they are all interconnected. These are nothing but small caves which are interconnected, and then you can see water flowing through these channels. You can see in the photograph, it is from Shahstradara area of Dehradun. You can see in this excuse me, you can see in this underground channel that water is flowing through. So it is very interesting to note this in the field. Then caverns, these are interconnected underground cavities in limestone formed by the action of groundwater. So they form the horizontal and vertical galleries and shafts. Then solutional valley, due to the solution activity which I just explained you, what happens that some sort of valleys are formed in the limestone region. So in this photograph, finally you can see sinkholes, valley sinks, Doline, Swallow Hole and Uvala. These are all caused due to the erosional activity or caused by this underground water. Now I will request Professor Bhaskar to tell you about the depositional landforms caused by underground water.
Dr. Meenal, you have very well explained the erosional features. The first and foremost is the geyserite deposits which are formed. And how are they formed? Because there is hot water, it dissolves the all the minerals, and when it gets cooled, it precipitates, and that forms the geyserite deposits. You can see in this diagram which is shown, this is there in New Zealand. It is a famous deposit. Similarly, we have one in Iceland. Now, what else can be the process? The next process can be replacement process. Replacement word means that you replace whatever is there in that solution, it is replaced by another set of chemicals. So replacement means that the composition where it is deposited, that rock gets changed. Then you have the next process which is called petrification. Now petrification means stone forming. What happens in this case, for example, if there is wood, there are pores in that wood or the fibers, and this silica carrying, water carrying silica, they get deposited on these pores and they become petrified. Sometimes you can also have fossils which get petrified. So these soft parts, they are not preserved. But when petrification takes place, the imprints get preserved because of these processes. So you are seeing, learners, that it is essentially solution activity, chemical activity of water which is causing all these features. The next feature which you should know is called geode. What is geode? If you see, it is nothing but a mineral which has a cavity, and inside that cavity you have different precipitation of minerals. Normally you have calcite, silica, zeolites, etc. And this is formed in the cavities of basic volcanic rocks. And this is because the solutions carry silica, calcite, etc. The next process which takes place is called concretions. Concretions means it is forming around a nucleus, and this forms because of the increasing size over a nucleus, and this is different from nodular which is there in the sedimentary rocks. So concretions are also feature of the depositional feature of this underground water. The next important feature which Dr. Meenal Mishra mentioned is stalactites and stalagmites. If you go to caves, you will see wonderful pictures inside. You will see as Dr. Meenal Mishra said, in the top of the cave, you will have water dripping and they will have calcium carbonate. So from the top they will be deposited. So one part, and in the bottom, from bottom they will go up, that is stalagmite. The top part is stalactite, and when they both combine, they form the prism. And you can have so many features in cave, draperies, etc. Essentially, as Professor Meenal Mishra mentioned, the water is becoming slightly acidic, limestone is a weak rock, and this results in the formation of stalactite and stalagmite. Another important feature which is found in the caves is called calcareous tufa. These are formed in the bottom. These are friable, and these are porous, and these are different from the volcanic tuffs, and if it gets slightly hardened, this is called travertine. So you can have these deposits. Then you can see this diagram which I am showing here. You can see the white deposits on these caves. These are the moon milk deposits which are there. Then if you see the diagram which is drawn, you have the stalactites, stalagmites, and when they join they have the prism. So you can see this is a typical karst topography which is there in a limestone terrain. If you go to the next diagram, you can see the karst topography. Now what is karst topography? Karst topography is the topography which is formed in an area, for example, where there is limestone or gypsum which get easily dissolved, And what happens, you have these kind of important features. If you see this diagram carefully, you will have karst valley, you will have sinkholes. What are sinkholes? They are deep depressions which connect to the underground. It can connect to the underground, and below this you can have caves. You can see these yellow paintings here. These are the caves, and these caves also can have water transported. Sometimes you see disappearing stream because the terrain is not uniform. It appears as if the stream which is flowing has suddenly disappeared. In fact, it has gone underground, and suddenly you will see reappearing streams. That again is a feature of the karst valley, the karst topography. So you will see channels, sinks, solution valleys. These are all typical features of a karst topography. In Slovenia, for example, these are the type areas where you have. In India, you have in the Meghalaya, you have lot of karst caves, and several of them are there. Now, if you see each of these geological agent, if you see in your text which is there in the table, they have different erosional, transportational and depositional characteristics. Dr. Kakoli has said to you the basic characteristics. Dr. Meenal Mishra has said about the erosional, and I discussed about depositional. And each of these agents have unique transportational features, unique depositional features, unique erosional features. Now, if you see wind, you know it is deflation, abrasion and attrition. If you see the river, you see the table which is there, you will see that it is corrosion, solution activity also. And if it is groundwater, it will be entirely chemical action, it will be precipitation. Similarly, the erosional landforms of wind are different. You have seen that deflation basin etc. can be formed. In case of river, typical one is to have V-shaped valleys, whereas in case of groundwater, you have seen already, we have discussed how karst topography is formed. Again, the transportation mechanisms are different, and if you see all this, you will understand the geological role of different agent. Now I would request Dr. Kakoli to sum up the whole discussion.
Yes, sir. Learners, today we have discussed about underground water, as Professor Bhaskar have discussed about these geological activities related to erosion, transportation and deposition in respect to wind, river and groundwater. Basically, we have discussed about groundwater. So let me quickly summarize it. You see, we have discussed that water occur on the earth's surface in all the three known states, that is solid, liquid and gas. Then we have discussed that water vapors they form from the evaporates from the ocean surface in the form of vapors which collect in the atmosphere and precipitate down on the earth's surface, which we normally term as rainfall or snowfall. Then you see this rainwater flows either as runoff that generates steams which combines together to form the river, and that percolates down to form this underground water, and we also term underground water as groundwater or subsurface water. Then we have also discussed about the saturated and unsaturated zones, and the boundary between this saturated and unsaturated zone is called the water table, or this is also termed as groundwater table. And the sources of underground water are rainwater and glacial melt. Then we have discussed about the erosions by underground water, which involves the processes of chemical action. And the resulting erosional landforms are landslides, caves, underground channels, caverns and sink. And the depositional landforms resulting due to the activity of groundwater are geyserite, petrification, geoid, then concretions, stalactite, then stalagmites, calcareous tufa. This we have discussed. So learners, we end the session today on geological work of underground water. Thank you.